I'll try to give a general overview of first the connection between graffiti and protest in Egypt over the last 5 years, and from there to the role of law in revolution in Egypt, both as the promise of an emancipatory project and the promises that were laid on the rule of law initially over 5 years ago with the beginning of the Arab Spring, leading up to the counter-revolutionary moment we are in today across Arab Spring countries, in which the rule of law is regarded not as holding a promise for emancipation, but rather as being the cause of the counter-revolution. So what I will try to describe over the last 5 years is the sense of rule of law fatigue, elections fatigue, leading up to the present counter-revolutionary moment of holding, again, the rule of law as responsible for the failure of the revolution. So perhaps nothing is more indicative of the failure of revolution in at least Egypt than the silence of our city walls today. Right after the revolution started in January 25, 2011, there was an explosion of graffiti across the city, at Cairo at least, and most of the images I have are from Cairo. The initial images were just simple statements that were spray painted across government buildings or police cars. The first one, which I ever saw, was this one, spray painted on the asphalt of Tahrir Square, and it simply says, "Don't look under you, freedom is in front of you," or "freedom is ahead of you." Second movement in the development of revolution graffiti was stencil. This one obviously has a civilian tow truck pulling away a military tank, and the line under it is "No parking except on the borders of the country," and an obvious reference to stop the army from intervening more in Egypt's politics, as it has been over the last 60 years. This graduated into incredibly detailed murals. This is the American University in Cairo campus on Tahrir Square. And we have the good fortune and the bad fortune of being right next to the Ministry of Interior. So all the main streets leading to the university were blocked by these humongous cement blocks, which then turned into murals like this one and like this one, which is another side leading to the university and the Ministry of Interior. These images you don't see anymore. What you get is a great deal of whitewashing of the paintings, and on the whitewash you get a return back to the writing on the wall. This one saying "Imsah wa narsam," which means whitewash and I will paint again. This one is the gate to the university a year ago. Whitewashing of the entire wall, and again written on it is "Ta'ishu tadhinu," which means long live and whitewash. And so the idea is, you know, so screw you, you'll do that, we'll just write on the whitewash again. Leading basically today to just very simple references that you find here and there, such as Sisi Qatil. So Sisi is our current army general, and so you get sporadic references to, you know, Sisi is a murderer. This is an old stencil, or a movement to the internet, in which you get more creative projects having essentially lost the city walls today. So this one is obviously Magritte, "Ceci n'est pas une pipe," and under it, "Ceci" in a reference to Sisi n'est pas un coup. And we'll start from this one because this leads nicely into the legal aspect of both the promises and the hopes of revolution and how graffiti has dealt with them. So this idea that this is not a coup or this is a revolution brings us back to the beginning of the counter-revolutionary moment we live today, which is June 30th, 2013. We had humongous demonstrations, exceeding in size the initial demonstrations which led to Mubarak's ouster back in 2011. The demonstrations of the end of June 2013 had pretty much using the same slogans that were used back in 2011, so dégage out. By that night, we had Tahrir Square full to the brim. And the demand at the time was that Morsi, the country's first civilian democratically elected president, should step down. We had, on the same night, this is an army helicopter that was throwing candies and little flags at the demonstrators in an initial obvious support of the demand that Morsi would step down. By July 3rd, the army had stepped into the streets, and the streets were emptied out. And then we get into the moment that leads that up to today, which is an argument of how do you classify the events that led to Morsi's ouster? Was it a revolution or was it a coup? And the conflict of coup or revolution is very indicative of the over-legalization of the revolution until today, but also of the use of legal language, essentially also towards the international media. So on your right, you have Morsi supporters, the Muslim Brotherhood president, saying it is a coup, not a revolution, meaning the popular revolts that led to his ouster. On the other side, you have the people give a legal proxy to General Sisi against violence and terrorism, which is a flipping of the legal definition of what really happened. It's a coup on the one side, no to military coup. The army's role is to protect the borders of the country and not destroy its institutions. That's the one on the side. This one doesn't need any explanation. This is from the massive sit-ins in Rab'a and Nahda, which were then brutally removed in August 2013, a couple of months later. This is, again, very much clearly directed at international audiences, anti-coup, wanted murderer, our General Sisi with the Hitlerian flag, and then the flip side of it, a demand that he legally represent the people, and then Egyptian TV taking up this banner for almost 2 years, Egypt fighting terrorism. We stayed like this until 2015, until a year ago. CNN supports terrorism. Obama supports terrorism. And in the interim, an emergence of President Sisi, at the time still Minister of Defense, as something of a huge national icon. So this is his picture on white chocolate, which became quite popular. This is his picture also on different types of white chocolate. This is a new type of palm dates, sorry, which is called Balah Sisi, so Sisi dates, and it's more expensive than the dates next to it. It's 90 piasters. This is actually a wedding of a couple of friends of mine where the husband is supporting Rab'a and the wife is supporting Sisi, and so this became the sign for supporting the Muslim Brotherhood after the bloody breaking down of the Rab'a protests, whereas Sisi became obviously supporting Sisi. So the country is really split down, and the country remains split down until today. And the country is being split down can be detected legally from the fact that over the last 5 years, we have gone to the polls literally 18 times. So we have voted 18 times until now. This is an electoral map of Egypt. The first voting was whatever happened to Mubarak's constitution. 2 months after Mubarak stepped down, the military had taken command, and the agreement between the military and the Muslim Brotherhood was that the constitution had not fallen down with Mubarak's ouster, but that rather we can ask for a referendum to amend the constitution. What would be called eventually revolutionary forces were against the referendum and wanted to vote no. That vote was lost. That led to parliamentary elections under the amended constitution. This is our lovely parliament, in which this was the first time for many of us ever to vote, with sort of excessive dipping of your finger in the phosphoric ink out of absolute no knowledge of how much of your finger should you dip in, and also no knowledge of how long the indelible ink actually remains on your finger, and it bloody does for quite a long time. Parliamentary elections were done in 3 phases. First for an upper house and then a lower house. Just go through the images very quickly. Indelible ink. Followed by Senate elections, followed by an initial constitutional assembly, which produced the first draft of a constitution. That first draft of the Constitution was annulled by the Supreme Constitutional Court, which is hosted in this incredibly ugly neo-pharaonic postmodern monstrosity, which looks like a sort of the Luxor Hotel from Las Vegas rather than a court building. A second Constitutional Assembly was created. It produced a constitution which was then annulled by our Cour de Cassation, our Court of Cassation, leading to a third set of elections in which this graffiti emerged, which is الانتخابات فخ, elections are a trap, and hashtag we're boycotting. That was the beginning of my mind losing faith in the electoral process. There is still many elections that came after that, leading up, or at least in the middle, to what was called the trial of the century, which is Mubarak being put on trial for 3 petty crimes that he was accused of committing, and having to see our lovely president with this very defiant, attitude. So Mubarak stepped down. Morsi, who was then elected after him, ended up also being in court. So we have 2 presidents now who are serving prison terms. We've gone through 3 constitutive assemblies, 2 constitutions, 4 parliaments, including 2 senates that were dissolved. And the general experience today is essentially a loss of faith in the legal system and in the potentials of the rule of law to have saved the revolution. And rather, if the revolution failed, it's because a failure to imagine any alternative starting from March 2011, other than those that are constituted by a liberal legal sense of already a teleological end of where we should have been from the beginning. And I'll stop there. There's more images, but thank you.